the news.
Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News, with a few bits of news for you to choke on from April 7th. Well, folks, it's another beautiful day in the free market apocalypse. President Donald Trump, economic mastermind and part-time golf course gremlin, has just announced plans to potentially jack up tariffs on Chinese imports by another 50%, possibly bringing the total as high as 104%. Because if your economic strategy doesn't sound like a loan shark's interest rate, are you even doing capitalism right? This fresh tariff tantrum comes after China dared to retaliate against the last round of US tariffs. Trump's response? Double down, triple down, quadruple the market chaos, and call it art of the deal. The Dow immediately responded with another deep plunge, which economists are calling deeply concerning, and your 401k is calling a hate crime. Even Goldman Sachs, a group not exactly known for leftist takes, warned of slower growth and higher uncertainty. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, the only man left in Washington trying to keep the US from becoming Venezuela with nukes, hinted at possible interest rate cuts to counter rising inflation, which, to be honest, is kind of like using a wet paper towel to put out a grease fire caused by a man actively pouring gasoline on it. International leaders like Japan's Shigeru Ishiba and Ursula von der Leyen of the EU are looking at us like we're the drunk uncle at a global dinner party who just threw a chair through the fish tank. Even Elon Musk, newly minted Minister of Layoffs and Death Tunnels, thinks the tariff hike, particularly in the EU, is bad business. But that didn't stop Trump's living sinus infection of a trade advisor, Peter Navarro, from snapping back that Elon isn't a real manufacturer, just a car assembler, which is rich coming from a guy whose biggest economic idea is what if we just beat China by hurting ourselves harder. It's not just about China anymore, it's about market volatility, global instability, and turning the economy into a high-stakes toddler slap fight while the rest of the world prays the United States doesn't take them down with it. So buckle up, friends. This isn't economic strategy, this is tariff-based terrorism. House Republicans are once again fighting among themselves, this time over how to extend Trump's 2017 tax cuts without fully admitting they're trying to bankrupt the country to buy a few more yachts. So what's at stake? Oh, just $5.7 trillion in lost revenue over the next decade. That's trillion with a T, which, if you're curious, is enough to end homelessness multiple times over, or just slightly less than what Elon Musk spends annually trying to feel something. On one side, you've got House fiscal conservatives demanding $2 trillion in spending cuts to soften the blow, and by spending cuts we mean gutting Medicaid and food assistance programs, because solving poverty is taking away food from poor people and handing it to Raytheon in the form of guided missiles. On the other side, the Senate budget resolution proposes only 0.2% of those cuts, and it's cool with increased borrowing, which basically means slapping it all on the national credit card and letting the next generation deal with it during the climate collapse. And we can't forget about Andy Harris, a Republican insisting on detailed deficit reduction plans before accepting any Senate compromise, because moral clarity is when you demand paperwork before you rob the Treasury. And Trump, running interference from the golf course, is promising folks like Senator Josh Hawley that Medicaid will be untouched, despite the fact that Medicaid's one of the only big-ticket programs left to cut that isn't the Pentagon or Congress's own healthcare. The entire plan is cooked using creative accounting methods that omit the full cost of extending the tax cuts, something nonpartisan budget experts have labeled deeply misleading, which is polite economists speak for this is a Ponzi scheme with a flag on top. So while they're torching the safety net, they're still all in on Trump's broader agenda: military expansion, immigration crackdowns, and entitlement fear-mongering. And yes, that includes blaming Democrats for giving Social Security to illegal aliens, a totally real thing that absolutely didn't come from a YouTube comment section. So Republicans are basically fighting over whether to take the country off of a cliff in a Rolls Royce or a Humvee, and whether to strap the poor to the hood or just leave them behind entirely. This is something that would only make sense in a fascist fever dream, but here we are. ICE, under the Trump administration, deported a Maryland man who had no criminal record, a legal right to be in the United States, and a wife and child who are American citizens, to one of the most brutal prisons in the Western Hemisphere. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a 29-year-old journeyman in training, just trying to live a normal life, was forcibly dumped into El Salvador's Secot super prison, a place so dystopian it makes Guantanamo look like summer camp. Why? Because ICE ICE claimed without a shred of evidence that he was part of MS-13, despite the fact that an immigration judge explicitly ordered in 2019 that he should not be deported due to credible fears of gang violence. So a man, legally allowed to work and live here, who posed zero threat, was stripped away from his family and thrown into a torture box in Central America because ICE, under Trump's new rules, apparently doesn't do paperwork, court orders, or reality anymore. U.S. District Judge Paula Zines called the deportation wholly lawless, which is legalese for what the absolute hell is wrong with you. But the Justice Department, clearly on a speed run to authoritarianism, had the gall to challenge her ruling and say the court didn't even have the power to demand his return. Even more surreal, DOJ lawyer Erez Ruveni admitted the deportation was wrongful, so naturally he was put on administrative leave by Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's apparently treating ethics like a communicable disease. This is more than an error, it is a blueprint. The Trump administration is building a parallel justice system where immigrants, especially brown ones, can be vaporized from their homes without any due process, oversight, or cause. They're daring the courts to stop them, and when a lawyer tries to do the right thing, they punish him for telling the truth. Because in 2025, law and order doesn't mean following the law, it means enforcing Trump's will. And if you're in the way, judge, immigrant, or attorney, they'll crush you and call it an administrative error. ICE is no longer an enforcement agency. It's a militia in a pantsuit. And this wasn't a mistake, it was a message. In Gaza, Israel has killed another journalist, another camera full of proof crushed, another voice silenced, another name added to the endless list that reads like an obituary for truth itself. An Israeli airstrike obliterated a media tent outside Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, killing 2 people, including journalist Yusuf al-Fakawi, and injuring 6 others. One wounded was a photographer, Hassan Islaya, whom Israel now claims is a Hamas militant, as if that justifies targeting journalists filming outside of a hospital. Let me be brutally clear, this was not a battlefield, it was a press encampment outside of a hospital, and Israel bombed it. They didn't stop there. Airstrikes pounded residential zones, hospital perimeters, and crowded shelters, killing 32 more Palestinians, many of them women and children. Gaza's health infrastructure is in shambles. The World Food Program has stopped food distribution. Medicine is gone. Fuel is gone. Hope is gone. Over 1,000 healthcare workers and at least 173 journalists have died. Listen to that again. Over 1,000 healthcare workers and at least 173 journalists dead. That's not war. That's a systematic extermination of witnesses. This is a state trying to blind the world as it pulls the trigger. Israel claims Hamas uses civilians as shields, but where is the proof? Hospitals deny the presence of fighters. The publicly released footage we keep seeing are just dead children, bombed ambulances, crumbling maternity wards. It doesn't show shields, it shows targets. Meanwhile, in the White House, Netanyahu is hugging Trump and floating a plan for the voluntary migration of Gazans, which is like offering someone a glass of water while setting their house on fire. This isn't policy, it's ethnic cleansing with a press release. The entire idea has been condemned as a potential violation of international law, but Israel doesn't seem to care anymore. Why would they? They've got the United States as weapons, blank check political cover, and decades of impunity. And in the United States, the press and politicians tiptoe around the G word, but it is genocide. When a state deliberately targets civilians, starves them, bombs hospitals, kills children, and silences the press, that's genocide. Yusuf al-Fakawi died with a camera in his hand because truth is dangerous. Because in Gaza, the truth itself is a target, and every time we let this continue, we're helping pull the trigger. Dr. Peter Marks, the former chief vaccine regulator at the FDA, says he was forced out for doing the bare minimum, protecting vaccine safety data from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our nation's top anti-vaxxer, now inexplicably in charge of health policy. That's like putting a flat earther in charge of NASA. Marks refused to let RFK Jr.'s cronies dig their hands into the VAERS system, a database that contains unverified reports about vaccine side effects. It's sensitive, it's complex, it's very easy to misuse, it's basically a gold mine for conspiracy theorists. And that's exactly why RFK Jr. wanted in. Dr. Marks didn't even slam the door. He created a transparency plan to give the public more insight into vaccine safety. But that wasn't enough because RFK Jr. doesn't want safety. He wants sabotage. He wants to revive debunked garbage like the myth that vaccines cause autism. He wants to shut down research, cripple immunization programs, and turn public health into a QAnon subreddit. And now, unfortunately, he has the power to do this, and he's using it. Dr. Marks called it what it is: misinformation operation backed by government muscle. He directly linked measles deaths in unvaccinated children to Kennedy's policies. Not hypothetically, dead kids, real graves. And for speaking that truth, he's gone. Kennedy's office claims he supports vaccines, which is an awful lot like a butcher saying they love animals. The policies say otherwise. He's frozen vaccine R&D, spread disinformation, and turned public health into a clown show with a body count. This is not a difference of opinion. It's an act of biological warfare on the American people. When a government official promotes false science during a surge of preventable diseases, they are not just wrong, they are dangerous. And when they force out people trying to stop the damage, that's sabotage. Peter Marks is a professional who tried to save lives. RFK Jr. is a reckless ideologue who's already cost lives. We let this happen. We let a man who spent decades poisoning public trust with Facebook memes become the guy holding the keys to vaccine policy during a time of record outbreaks. Get your shots, because this is only going to get worse. While Donald Trump keeps playing chicken with Russian war crimes and flirting with Putin like it's prom night, President Zelensky is doing the adult thing, trying to keep his country alive. He just met with British and French military leaders to discuss a European-led peacekeeping force, because guess what? Russia is still bombing Ukrainian civilians, still killing Ukrainian children, still trying to erase a sovereign nation off the map. 18 people just died in Kryvyi, 9 of them children. And what does Russia say? Oh, we were aiming at soldiers. Yeah, soldiers hiding inside of a playground slide. France is offering to station troops. The UK is pushing for a deterrence strategy, real support, strategic talks, not tweets, not truth social meltdowns, not conspiracy theories about biolabs, actual plans to stop the bleeding. But then there's Trump, king of the cowards. He's paused US aid to Ukraine in the past, he's rejected Ukraine's NATO membership, and now he's sitting on his hands while Europe does all of the hard work, because America First is selling out your allies to a fascist war criminal. And Zelensky, he's had it. He openly called out the US ambassador Bridget Brink for issuing one of those sad little "we're deeply concerned" press statements instead of naming the actual murderer in the room, Russia, Putin, the guy launching the missile strikes at apartment buildings. Zelensky praised countries like Japan, Switzerland, the UK, and Germany for doing what America now apparently can't, telling the truth and taking a damn stand. This isn't some regional spat. This isn't a Cold War relic. This is a live genocide being live streamed to the world, and the guy leading the GOP wants to give Putin a Nobel Peace Prize for it. Ukraine doesn't need more condolences. It needs weapons, support, real partnerships, and it needs them now before peacekeeping force turns into recovery mission. You don't meet genocidal maniacs halfway. You stop them, you isolate them, you make sure the world never forgets their crimes. So maybe it's time America decides which side of history they want to be on, because Zelensky already chose his, and he did it while under fire. Remember when America gave a damn about protecting workers from getting cancers, crushed in mines, or suffocating in sawdust? Yeah, that was cute. Now, thanks to sweeping federal staffing cuts under Trump's government-raising rampage, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health is being gutted like a fish. 850 of its 1,000 employees have been laid off. That's not a budget cut, that's a public health hit job. You like firefighters? Cool. Guess what? The Firefighter Cancer Registry, you know, the one tracking deadly job-related cancers for first responders, is basically dead. But don't worry, I'm sure thoughts and prayers will stop tumor growth just fine. Oh, and coal miners? Hope you weren't counting on your black lung research or your health screenings to keep you alive. That's on the chopping block too. After all, what's more efficient than dying before you can file for workers' comp? And hey, just when you thought respirators and masks might still be a priority after a global pandemic, surprise! The National Personal Protective Technology Laboratory, you know, the place that certifies N95 masks, is on the edge of oblivion. If it folds, foreign companies with looser standards could flood the US with cheaper, sketchier products. So if you ever wanted to play respiratory roulette with a knockoff mask from definitely not fake meds.biz, your moment has arrived. Even Dr. John Howard, the guy who's been leading NIOSH since before TikTok was a thing, was canned, though political pressure brought him back to run the World Trade Center health program, presumably so the administration could avoid headlines like Trump fires 9/11 doctor. That's some real galaxy brain PR triage. What's left of NIOSH is being folded into some new Frankenstein agency called the Administration for a Healthy America, which sounds like a bootleg multivitamin your uncle buys on Telegram. No one knows what programs will survive the merger. Probably just the ones that don't offend CEOs. So fewer safety checks, fewer disease protections, fewer certified masks, more dead workers. But hey, Trump says we're draining the swamp, apparently by pumping it directly into your lungs. Worker protections in America weren't perfect, but they were at least real. Now they're becoming relics in a museum exhibit labeled "When the Government Pretended to Care." This isn't streamlining, it's a slow-motion sabotage. The people who will pay for it aren't sitting in Congress. They're digging coal, rushing into fires, and cleaning up after toxic train derailments. And we're telling them, good luck, hope your masks work, hope your tumors are benign. A child is dead. A school-aged child in Texas just died from measles. Again, a disease we had practically eradicated in the United States before anti-vaccine conspiracy garbage became mainstream political doctrine. This is the second childhood measles death in Texas this year, a state now holding 481 confirmed cases. 59 of them just showed up in the last 3 days. The outbreak has already spilled into New Mexico and Oklahoma. We're only in April. Nationwide, 607 cases, double last year's total, almost all among unvaccinated children and adults. Not because the vaccine doesn't work, it's 97% effective, but because the people in charge are now selling pseudoscience like snake oil in a 19th century saloon. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the anti-vaxxer-in-chief himself, a man whose medical credentials include yelling at pediatricians on Twitter and pushing vitamin A like it's the second coming of penicillin, he's flying to Texas, not to promote vaccination, not to organize emergency immunization drives, but to attend a funeral for the child his ideology helped kill. The irony is too tragic to be funny and too enraging to ignore. Kennedy's idea of public health leadership is pushing personal choice while parents bury their children. Meanwhile, real doctors like Senator Bill Cassidy are begging for clarity and action, pleading for strong messaging that measles isn't just a red rash and a fever. It can cause brain swelling, lung failure, permanent disability, and death. And let's not forget, this kid wasn't born into a pre-vaccine world. They died in the post-truth world, where one man's Instagram conspiracy can outweigh decades of science, where a vaccine that's been saving lives since the 1960s is now treated like witchcraft by a government official who runs the HHS like it's 1645. We don't need Kennedy at funerals, we need him out of office. This isn't just policy failure, it's negligent homicide via misinformation. And more children will die if this continues. We know how to stop measles. We had it stopped. And then we put the fox in charge of the chicken coop and watched it burn down the barn. There are parents in Texas tonight who won't get to kiss their child goodnight ever again, and the man who helped cause it is handing out vitamins and condolences while gutting vaccine research. There is no middle ground here. This is life and death, and RFK Jr. is choosing death. Good news, at least for now, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals just blocked Trump from yeeting Democratic appointees off of labor boards like he was cleaning house on The Apprentice. The case centered on Gwen Wilcox of the National Labor Relations Board and Kathy Harris of the Merit Systems Protection Board, two officials appointed to do things like, protect workers and stop government employees from getting railroaded. Trump fired both earlier this year because they weren't loyal enough to the cause of maximum corporate profit and minimum human rights. But the court just ruled 7-4 that, wow, you can't just sack people from independent agencies because your ego is itchy. Turns out there are these things called laws, specifically federal statutes and the 1935 Supreme Court case Humphrey's Executor, which put some brakes on a president turning every board and commission into a MAGA fan club. The ruling doesn't just reinstate Wilcox and Harris, it reaffirms that independent agencies are supposed to be independent, not just Trump's little toy train set where he gets to pick who wears the conductor hat and who gets run over. Naturally, the Trump administration is losing its collective mind. They're already prepping an appeal to the Supreme Court because if there's one thing this regime is consistent about, it's their tireless crusade to replace governance with authoritarianism. This isn't about policy, it's about power, total unchecked king of the castle power, and they're not going to stop until they purged every agency of anyone who still believes workers deserve a seat at the table. This isn't just about Wilcox and Harris either. This is about whether or not any agency from labor boards to food safety to environmental oversight gets to operate based on facts and fairness instead of Trump's mood swings and vengeance fantasies. So thank you to the appeals court for remembering that we're supposed to be a democracy, not a hostile corporate takeover run by a man with the emotional range of a sentient cheeseburger. But don't get too comfortable, because if this goes to the Supreme Court, and it very well might, we could be one decision away from turning every independent agency into a MAGA loyalty test. And if that happens, the only thing labor boards will be protecting is Elon Musk's right to fire you for blinking too loudly. President Donald Trump has axed U.S. Navy Vice Admiral Shoshana Chatfield from her top NATO position, not because of incompetence, scandal, or even a juicy Twitter controversy, but because she apparently failed the sacred MAGA loyalty oath. That's right, in 2025, it's not enough to serve your country, you must also serve the ego of a man who thinks military discipline is what happens when McDonald's forgets his french fries. This firing is part of an ever-widening purge of anyone in national security who might still possess an independent thought or, God forbid, a spine. Just weeks ago, Air Force General Timothy Hall, the director of the NSA, was tossed out like a broken AirPod with no explanation beyond whispers that he wasn't sufficiently Trump-pilled. Who's whispering these sweet nothings in his ear, you ask? Oh, just noted geopolitical expert and former Twitter banshee Laura Loomer, who reportedly played queenmaker in this rowing loyalty tribunal. If she thinks you're a secret Democrat or once made eye contact with Fauci, your career is over. The Pentagon has basically been reduced to a paranoid HR department run by QAnon. This is a purge, not a reshuffling. These aren't firings based on performance. They're excommunications from the Church of Trump. We're watching the national security apparatus of the most powerful country on earth become a MAGA cosplay operation where facts are suspicious, NATO is the enemy, and loyalty to the Constitution is a fireable offense. All of this is happening while the world burns literally and figuratively. Russia's chest thumping, China's flexing, cyber attacks are constant, and American troops are deployed across the globe. But sure, let's decapitate the NATO chain of command because they once liked a tweet by Liz Cheney. National security isn't supposed to be a reality show, but under this regime, it's become one complete with public firings, revenge arcs, and a supporting cast of fringe internet personalities pulling the strings. We're not protecting democracy anymore. We're auditioning for its reboot on Truth Social. That's all for Brainrot News. Like and subscribe before the Weather Service, the Pentagon, and maybe your local librarian are all replaced by Rumble streamers named Patriot Dad 1776. We'll keep you posted, unless we're next.